All right, everyone, thank you for taking your lunch hour to join us. Today we have the great pleasure of having John Garrigues from Wells Fargo. He is going to give us a wonderful budgeting and saving presentation today, as well as giving us some tips on saving that he's picked up with his 35 years in the banking industry. So thank you, John, for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, this is one of my one of the presentations I really like doing the most. This is who I am. I'm John Garrigues, and I live in Salt Lake, but I work with schools in the Upper Midwest. And so you get to see my picture. The first thing we talk about is setting goals, and the biggest important thing there is that you set goals that are important to you. We'll go and we'll talk about setting goals that are important because then you're more likely to get them done. And then we talk about understanding money, how money flows, understanding what your money looks like and some money habits. And then we talk about tips, some things that can help you with your money. And then in the end, we have resources, some things to show you. So I'm going to get over here kind of quick. And think about the things when you're thinking about your goals, basically what is important. What I always find is it's amazing when I do a budget, I find out how much money I'm spending on things that aren't that important to me. And what you want to do is you want to be able to focus your money on what is the most important to you. Maybe it's school, maybe it's going on a vacation. We'll get into that a little bit later, but and then what you would like to save for, that's part of it too. And then just, what are your financial goals? When you see what's important, you want your goals to be things you're willing to save and make happen. So we have both short-term and long-term goals. There are a lot of different types. These are just some examples. We build an emergency fund, a rainy day fund. And, I think of that like, if you needed tires on your car, are you going to have to use a credit card, or are you going to have had some money saved for it? Type of things like that. You can always have something come up. It's amazing, I lost a textbook in college, and coming up with a little extra money was a killer. You just never know when you're going to need some extra money. Or maybe your goal is that you want to go on a spring break trip. We always use the emergency fund thing as an example, but maybe you want to go on a spring break trip in March. So now that's a goal. Or birthday gifts, long-term things. These things like saving for a child's education. This deck was put together for people who are in businesses, not specifically for college students. So I don't think most college students have children that are saving for college, but but I do know college students who bought a home, and that if you get a job, you need to start working on saving for retirement. So when you do leave college, start saving for retirement immediately. Those long-term goals are easy when you're in a certain spot. But so those things are the little more long-term. I like this. This is a page from we've got a budgeting toolkit that Andrea can send you, and this is the first page. What are my goals? And if you don't write it down, it won't happen. That's something my wife always says, and I've heard other people say that. If you want something to happen, you need to write it down, and then it's a reminder. At least I do. And this one says, build an emergency fund. The timeline is a year, and you want to have $2,000. If we were going to do the spring break trip, you would say the timeline is whatever it is till March, and then you maybe however much you need to go on your trip, or maybe you want to buy a bike or put a down payment on a car. There are lots of different goals you could do, but get them written down, and maybe start little, maybe have several. You can work on several things at once. I wouldn't make it so much that it's overwhelming. It's like if you do a to-do list that's too big, you never get it all. I would keep it simple to start with. So, and then this is how do you plan to reach that goal? For example, like maybe you want to start saving some money, so you're not going to dine out as much, or you're going to go get coupons. And you might have money that you have extra every month. So maybe you're going to put in there, I'm going to take from my positive cash that I have at the end of the month and save some of it. So this is kind of where you plan to come up with the money, and think of how you're like taking, what kind of action you're going to take. It might be you want to get a second job. to come up with the money for that. So, it's kind of, there are a lot of, that's, my daughter-in-law did that. They were going to buy a house. She wanted some very specific furniture. She got a job at the furniture place, and with that second job and an employee discount, they have an amazing dining room table. So that was how my daughter-in-law met a financial goal. She, knew she wanted nice furniture, made it happen. But you want to write that down too. So, and then now we're getting to that section where you want to understand your money. And the biggest thing, you want to get a handle on it. You want to understand where it's coming from and where you're spending it. You don't always have as much control over where it's coming from, but you do have control over your spending a little more. And some things, we'll get into some of the things you don't have as much control over. Your rent. You don't have control over how much tuition costs, but you do have control over a lot of your smaller expenses. And in an income, you may have some control over that. You may not, whether you can work extra hours, but you don't want to work too much because of school, or there are a lot of ways that you will have to understand these things. And then you will get to where we see whether you have extra cash at the end of the month or whether you have more spending than you have income. And those are things you need to know. So here's a little step-by-step approach to do it. The money coming in is, that seems easy. It's just, you may have, I've had a couple students say, I don't have money coming in. I work all summer and I have you have like a pot of money you're drawing from. Well, what is that money that you have needs to last you 6 months, let's say, or however long until you get to go to work again. And I would divide it by that and say, okay, I have an average of this much a month. Or once I've paid my tuition, I have this much left over. So I would take your income from that savings if you're one of the students who isn't working or doesn't have, some kind of stipend or some allowance or some income. So that's always a question too. Sometimes you don't have income for 3 months while you're, in between you're doing your summer job over the Christmas break. I was one of those guys. I worked all summer and then I would go back over Christmas break and work 2 or 3 weeks at the same place. And so my income was sporadic. So, and then you look at all your expenses and your savings and you subtract them. And if you have a positive net cash flow, that means you're living within your income. And that's a good thing. You have a little money left over. You can use it for your goals. You're not building up a debt on your credit cards. If you're in a negative cash flow situation, you probably don't have as much money in your checking account and your credit cards are getting a bigger balance every month. And that's not a good place to be. So, it's harder because eventually you're going to have to pay those credit cards off. And so that's why we start looking at this equation to help you kind of get in that good place where you're not spending more than you have. Monthly income, this is the top part of the worksheet. And, this one's got some different things. Believe it or not, there are students with investment income. And I talked to a guy the other day who somehow bought a house and had 4 roommates, and he had income from his house. That's amazing. I wouldn't have thought of buying a house when I was in college. I was lucky to just to make it. It was a tight time for me, but some people have other things besides salary and wages. Maybe that other income is you have your parents will send an allowance. Maybe there's some sort of a monthly income that you have coming in. I have a neighbor whose father died. The husband died, and the kids all have a monthly income from Social Security, as long as they're in school and they don't get a job. I don't think they're allowed to work, but they have income from their father passing away. So there's lots of different kinds of income. And then the monthly budgeting here. This lists a ton of expenses. You probably won't fill out all those lines. Not everybody has a car lease. If you don't have a car, you don't have car insurance, for instance. And maybe you do or don't have to pay for parking. I was shocked. I don't know about the University of Montana. You guys have a lot of bicycles, which is really cool. But the University of Utah discourages students parking on campus. They want them to take public transport. It's $50 a month to park at the University of Utah. Is it, Andrea, is that expensive at the University of Montana? They pay $600 a year to park. But I was shocked to think of a college student paying that much to park. But But if you were at the University of Utah, you'd have to put $50 in that line right down there. And I'm getting off track here because I'm shocked by how much I feel like they're ripping those kids off up there. Anyway, it's interesting. I can do this form with two things. I have one credit card I use mostly, and then I use a debit card. I use a debit card for almost everything. But then I have a couple things that get a credit card that are paid automatically. So I can look at my bank account and I can look at one credit card statement and I can fill this whole thing out. And what you can do, we have a thing called with us, it's called My Spending Report, but every bank and every credit union that has online banking, and you should be on online banking, you should be able to look at your bank account on your phone nowadays. You can do a spending report, and you can open up and say, and list all the transactions and then say sort by who it went to. If you grocery shop at the same place every day, it'll show the grocery store charges. If you buy gas, it'll show the gas charges. It'll show if you went to the bagel shop, or coffee every day, it'll show you how much you spent on coffee for the year and for the month, and it'll list. You can get all this information really easily in your online banking. It used to be people had to keep track of expenses. And if you pay cash for stuff, you would have to keep track of it too and add that in. But getting a handle on the expenses, sometimes it's just shocking how much. I used to, they had those Jamba Juice, and then it became Zuka Juice, those big juice drinks that are like $5 or $6. I used to get one of those every evening after the gym. Yeah, and I thought I'm, being so healthy. And then I realized it had 1,500 calories. It was mostly sugar, and I was spending an awful lot of money. And I cut those out, and it was amazing how much more cash I had to spend. My son, who's fortunately quit smoking 12 years ago, he's 34, and he quit smoking 12 years ago, and he has an app on his phone he can push, and it will say, when he quit smoking, 2 packs a day times 12 years, and it's like over 10 grand. I mean, it's thousands of dollars he's saved by keeping track of an expense. So it's, making a change. So this is how you figure too. Also, if you have savings, you put in the savings into the worksheet. And if you're saving for something now, then you can add that in there. And then you come in, and this is how you figure your cash flow. The income minus the expenses minus the amount you're saving is the cash you have left over. And it's a little tip if you want to, as you track it monthly. Once you've done a budget, you kind of need to do this to get started. But if you may not have time to track it every month, you can look at your checking account and know if it's got more money in it at the end of the month than it had at the beginning, or less. And if your credit card balances are higher or lower, you can look at a couple things. Hopefully you don't have a whole bunch of credit cards, but if you had a couple or one, you could look at that balance and the balance in your checking account and know whether you spent more money than you made last month or less. You can kind of do an eyeball once you've got your budget done, and kind of help yourself stay on track. So, okay, so if you have money left over, then that's wonderful. Then you can review your short and long-term goals and prioritize and decide what you want to do with that extra money, and what goals you want to put it towards. These are just some examples. Again, an emergency fund, a vacation, maybe birthdays, or maybe then those longer term goals. And maybe not buying a home, but maybe getting a down payment on a car. That was always a challenge for me. I always had a beater car in college, and but I always, instead of saving for a down payment on a car, I was always saving for the next repair bill. And that was sort of like an emergency fund. But it's that's in fact, that's how I learned to budget. I'm going to tell the personal. When I was in college, I had a truck, and I went to school at Utah State, which is in the northern part of Utah, which would have similar weather to you guys. It's a little higher elevation. It was kind of the Great White North of Utah. And I had a bad winter because I had terrible tires. And I knew that by the next winter, I had to have snow tires on my truck. And I just made a goal of saving for my snow tires. And I put a certain amount of my money that I was making all summer aside for the tires, and had that little savings account. And it wasn't huge, but it built up enough I could buy the tires, and I bought those tires in the late fall. And then I'd gotten used to having money in that account. There was something, you know how when you get liked on Facebook or whatever, you know, you get a, what is it? Not an endorphin. You get a little a jolt of happy feeling. I can't think of the name of it now, but that's what I had from my savings account. When I looked in there and I had a little extra money, I felt safer. And so then when I'd spend it on the tires, that bothered me that that account had less. So I kept putting the money in anyway every month. And then that's how I started building. In college, I started a habit of saving because I needed snow tires or I would have been in trouble. And so I remember that. And that's the kind of thing that if you develop that habit of saving a little bit, you'll be grateful you did. It'll be something that when you do get out of college and you get that wonderful dream job, or the next job, and then when you get out to where you're working and making some money, having those good habits will help you to be successful for the rest of your life. That's kind of the goal of this whole thing. So, and if you don't have money left over and you're in a negative thing, then I think you need to start asking, where am I spending my money and what's important to me? Because maybe that Jamba Juice, that $6 drink was not important enough to me. I had other things I needed to spend money on. And maybe you make your own coffee, or you get a less expensive coffee, or maybe you just don't eat out as much. It's kind of, if, from a standpoint of health and from a standpoint of financial health, physical health and financial health, you're probably better off to not eat as much fast food. And I know with COVID, it's amazing how many people I've heard that they say, well, we're eating in more and we've saved so much money over what we used to go out to eat. And that's a reality. There are some things you can do, maybe some things that you've cut back on and during COVID that have helped you save money. We could still carry that forward. That might be a way to find something positive out of a pandemic. But so, we look at expenses and what we can reduce. It's one of those things. I had a roommate who wanted to keep the heat on. I mean, he was baking us out, and our gas bill was huge. So we made him turn the heat down and get a sweater. There are always ways to increase your income, and always ways to save a little money too. You can find some ways to increase your income, and maybe even you've got toys you can sell. I love eBay for that. And then also, this bottom one here about paying late fees. I have a real, I can go down a rabbit hole on this one. I hate students paying fees. I don't think students should ever have to pay a fee on anything if they're paying attention. We have free checking accounts for students. Every credit union, every bank has some sort of free account. If you're paying a monthly service charge for your checking account, you need to go make a change, and even and talk to them about, I don't want to pay that fee. Also, if you're allowing your account to go negative, you're going to pay a fee if you overdraw your account. So you want to be in the right account, and then you want to handle it well. And I always tell students and anybody to go to their bank. If they can do it online, great. If they need a banker to help them, go talk to the bankers. The bankers would love to help you, and get an alert put on your checking account. So if your checking account the balance goes below $50, you'll get a little text or an email that says, hey, your balance is low. And then not to go spend money. What happens at gas stations, if you've got $50 in your account and you go spend $30 on gas, sometimes gas stations, it takes an extra day for that gas charge to hit your account. So if you just look at your balance too, you're going to think you have $50. Maybe you go buy something for 40 and think you have a little money, and you've actually overdrawn. And so you need to kind of pay attention. And the best story I heard, one of our branch managers told me about his brother. He had almost no money in his account, and he went and bought a bagel and a coffee, and that put him negative and overdrawn, and he got charged a $40 fee. And then he liked that bagel so much, he went and bought a second bagel and got a second charge. That also overdrew his account. So he had two late charges, or overdrawn, non-sufficient fund charges. He had two overdrawn fees. So he had two $40 fees and paid about $10 for two bagels and a coffee. So he paid $90 for two bagels and a coffee. And then he went into his brother, the branch manager, and said, "Will you waive my fees?" And the guy said, "Are you kidding? I'd get fired. You just pay attention, So even his brother couldn't help him out of that one. But those you hear stories once in a while about crazy things where people get a lot of fees from overdrawing their accounts. And so and students can find things cheap too. If every school has a Facebook page for furniture, when kids are moving out, they'll sell their furniture cheap. If you don't know where to find a good, inexpensive whatever, ask other students. Students are the best resource for each other on saving money. You guys all live on tight budgets and know how to, and students become experts on doing things well on a budget. So yeah, don't pay fees and don't pay too much. That's anyway, I have a pet peeve about fees. I don't want kids to pay fees. So, and then, managing your money, the expenses that you'd work on. Some expenses are fixed, like your rent, your mortgage. You can't, pretty much things like the car payment and tuition. You don't have any control over tuition, but maybe, if you're going half-time or something, but you don't really have, those things are going to be fixed. So you've got to plan on having those. There are some things that are flexible, utilities, groceries, like the eating out type of thing, and you can change some habits. And those you have more, you have a little bit more you can do with. And then discretionary. Eating out is actually a little more discretionary, but you have some things that just, you want to do, they're fun. And, maybe you want to, I don't know. I saw a whole bunch of kids paddleboarding from Weber State University up at a reservoir up in Utah. And they, if you want to do outdoor rec, maybe you can't afford your own paddleboard, but you can rent one from the rec center cheap. And, so maybe for some things that are discretionary, you can still do them, but just find a little better way to do it without needing to actually buy an expensive something. There are always ways to keep those and also just knowing what's a want and what's a need. Sometimes if I'm an impulse buyer, when I walk out of a store, there's a reason they put all the candy and the shiny bright wrappers and everything, because they know people like me are going to grab something. And on bigger purchase, I'm tempted to buy stuff and I have to consciously say, wait a day. My trick to keep me into knowing what's a want and a need for myself is to wait a day. If I'm still interested in it the next day, then maybe I can go back. And there's always going to be another deal too. Don't think, oh, I have to buy this right now because it'll never be this cheap again. They'll find it. There's always another deal. But try and keep track of what is important and what is a want and what's a need. So, and then savings tips too. These are cool. If you can save automatically, that's the way to do it. I know we have a thing with a checking account. If you have a checking account with us and you put a certain amount every month into a savings, have an automatic transfer, and it can be $25 or something, then that makes that used to make the account free. I think it still does, but you would need to talk to a banker. I know we've had some changes recently, but I think that having that deposit into a savings account makes that account free. And also, once it's out of sight, it's out of mind for me. That's a way to make my emergency savings, have it be automatic. And then things for, and set up an automatic transfer from your checking account into your savings, and then it works out really well. And then, automatic when you do get out of college, or if you're working now and your company has a retirement plan, take that money out before you even see it in your paycheck. They take it out. And once you get out of college, start saving for retirement with payroll deduction. You don't miss the money, and it'll, if you work for 30 years, you'll retire well. I mean, no matter how much starting retiring early is huge. And then reducing expenses, shop interest rates, cell phone plans. It's, my sons all got on one together and saved money too. So sometimes you can partner with other students or your family, and, eating in, this buy nothing week. I've never done a buy nothing week, but I do that wait a day thing for me. And then, we put in here on COVID too. There's things where we've saved money with COVID, and you can maybe keep doing that. So, and then on extra money, say you get a gift, or, your grandma loves you and sends you some money, or a bonus or a tax refund. I have I have my rule on that. And this is John, not Wells Fargo, but I always take a bonus and or a tax refund and I split it into thirds. And I put a third towards paying off debt and a third towards savings and then a third towards doing something nice for myself. Because if you get a bonus, you want to enjoy it, and that's normal, but you just don't want to spend the whole. If I put a little towards paying off, some debt and a little bit towards, saving, and then some for me, then I've done something smart with it financially, and that feels good. It feels good to see, car loan paying off or something, and your savings getting bigger. But then I've also rewarded myself, and you need to have some fun and live too. So that's my way of kind of taking something and not blowing it, but not being too boring about it either, I guess I'd say, and doing something wise financially, but also enjoying it. Might be better to say it that way. And then, you can get coupons and rebates, and students get discounts. Hey, I'm a senior. I get senior discounts now. I mean, Wendy's will give me a free drink with every meal, So, and students know where they get student deals too. They're always there'll be student rates too. So make sure you take advantage of student deals. And then, sell unneeded items. I'm amazed. I've got a couple pairs. I used to have 8 pairs of skis in my garage because you just saved up toys. And now you can actually, if you're done with them, go send them to, take them to the ski swap place. There's we have a gear up place here called the Gear Room, who sells used equipment, and it's fabulous. And then if you buy something and you realize you don't want it, take it back. A lot of places will, if it's not used, if you get it home and say, man, that was a mistake, don't be afraid to take something back and return it. That some people are shy about that, and you shouldn't be, because it's your money. So, and then, like just bringing your lunch, we always use that example. It could save $2,400 a year. And if you're a smoker and to cut back or stop, you can save a ton of money. There are all sorts of little things. Maybe it's your coffee, maybe it's there are lots of things that we can save money on. So, and then, one of the things about it too, you have to kind of make yourself a commitment. You have to say, this is important to me. And that's why we say, make your goals something that's important. And so, you have to make a commitment about it, and you have to check it and monitor it monthly. So once you've done the budget though, it's not as hard to monitor your spending, and the areas where you maybe are a little challenged. And so you can check it a lot easier monthly. And then weekly, you can, if you're focusing on changing habits, pay attention. And it's sort of like a diet. If you're trying to lose weight, if you, I'm always trying to keep my weight down, but it's amazing how I have a hard time driving past a bakery, and I can blow a diet easy. And don't give up. If you find you've got this budget and you blow it 1 month, don't give up. Go back and start over. Just get back on track. And it's just not that hard to get back on track. And if the goals are important to you, you will. And you want to be able to be successful in life. And I have a friend an airline pilot, who used to brag about making 3 times the money I do. And he lost his house in the recession in 2009. He lost his house. He didn't track his money. He made a ton of money, but he didn't manage it well. And that's something I've learned in banking, is it's not how much you make, it's how well you manage it. There are people who make a lot of money who fail. You can have a more modest income and still be very successful. So it's about managing it, not about how much you always make. So, and it's interesting. I call that passion versus practicality. People, if you're passionate about something, you're going to do better at it than if you're not. And if you're passionate about something that's a low income field, just be more practical. Passion and practicality, is kind of how I look at that. And so, yeah, you can, school teachers, we always hear they don't make money. They retire well, because they're usually pretty practical and they have great retirements. So you don't have to be an airline pilot to make a great life, to have a great life. So this spending report, these are tools that we have, and you don't have to, these are Wells Fargo tools I'm showing you because that's what I have to show, that's where I get my information. But you could find these pretty much anywhere. Every credit union will have them. Every bank will have something similar or some variation, and maybe some things will be combined. But like I use my spending report thing. That's the part that I use when I track my spending. And then I keep a budget with that budget toolkit that Andrea can send you. I don't do it online, but my wife and I do a budget, and we don't look at it every month. We look at it a couple times a year. And she's a CPA and I'm a banker, so we're kind of boring and frugal anyway. So we can usually keep in our budget. Plus, we're at a different point in our life. But and then the savings plan too. If you have something you want to save for, that's how you make goals happen. You can save for them. And then we have other resources too. So let me move quick past here. Yeah, we have some information on healthy habits, things that you can do to be healthy. We have that financial health toolkit, and then just some guidance too. You can get guidance from a bank. And if you want to do, I have to put this in here too, that if you want to contact a banker, it's right there. You don't, like I say, you can do it at any bank, but if you want to set an alert on your account, if it's not obvious how to do it on your online banking, go in and have wherever you bank, have the bankers help you put an alert on your checking for when you have a low balance, or you can have it actually ping you every time there's an expense. So every time some money goes out of your checking account. And there are a lot of managing money is so much easier that way than it used to be. So let's move on. We kind of buzzed through that because I know we're on everybody's lunch hour. But do we have any questions? It's amazing. A little bit of budgeting will go a long ways. So